Welcome back to another episode of What Drives You. And I'm one of the co hosts, Carl Bauer. And I have a super special guest and longtime friend joining us today, Mr. Tom Gregg.
Hey, Carl. Thanks for having me.
No problem, sir. I know we've been trying to do this for a minute with busy schedules and all the rest, and families and all the rest, work and then activities. So thank you for joining today.
My pleasure.
I have known Tom for quite a while. Matter of fact, I'm going to reminisce a little bit if it doesn't bore people. First, he was a customer on a couple different products, specifically a company called Dealer Fire. And I met him there and really quickly realized he was a super smart dude and probably way under his level of smartness in his role, but just ran a fantastic uh, uh, internet department and BDC at a big Toyota store in the southwest of Chicago. So I didn't have all the interaction. A friend of ours, Bill, who has been on a recent episode, did, who will come in back into the story later because he was, as Tom may or may not remember, Bill was my first boss in the car business in 1993.
Right. It's been a while. And
So
thanks,
tell
Carl.
us,
Yeah. So we did start working together at Dealer Fire. Obviously, I was at Toyota, and I appreciate the kind words. It was a lot of fun in those days.
how did you get in the car business? Let's start there.
Yeah, I started at a young age. I don't have any family ties to business, but I did start at the age of 16 years old. I was a porter. I sold cars at 18. I became a sales manager. I had a friend of mine that I worked with that was the finance manager in a suburb of Chicago called Crystal Lake, and he went to work in Chicago at a Toyota store. Has since been acquired, changed names, but he had an opportunity for me to be an internet manager at the age of 20 in Chicago. It was always my dream to be in the city, and that led to me being a sales manager within about 6 months. So I was fortunate by the age of 21, I was a new car manager at a Toyota store in Chicago, and I held a lot of roles after that.
Wow. Quick, and I know you are, again, I think sometimes when people come on and listen to these broadcasts and episodes, they think a few different things. If I didn't know you, this would sound like I'm blowing smoke up your hinder, but because I do know you, you are one of the hardest working guys in the industry. And so it makes sense to me that you could go from 16 years old as a porter to a young 20-year-old managing stuff because you're just a hard working dude and smart. That helps.
Well, thanks, Carl. I mean, I had good example growing up. My mom, single mom of three, two rather, but she had three jobs, and so I had a really good example of somebody that put a lot of work out there and busted their tail for everything we've had. So started young, and I've also had a lot of good opportunities where people have really believed in me. So certainly the combination of being prepared, going for it, and somebody taking a chance on me.
Yeah, for sure. That parents, whether you have one or you're blessed to have both or some combination, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, to have an example like that right in front of you. She didn't have time to mess around, right? She was trying to provide and feed everybody, and you either had to jump in and help or be a burden. So obviously you were a blessing, and I'm sure she was super proud of you. The Let's fast forward a little bit to uh and I'll never forget this day. And I can't remember if it was Joe Castle or Phil Penton or somebody else said, hey, there's this guy coming in, Tom, I think you know him, he's got this cool new product, you should check it out. And we were sitting in Oak Brook in that big conference room, and you were kind
Yeah.
of sharing excitedly the product, which I don't think was originally called vehicle acquisition, if memory serves. But
It was, yeah. So it was still van. I remember that building in the meeting
okay,
room.
so you pitched it, and I was like, holy crap, this is going to change the game a little bit. There was really nothing comparable out there. So tell us about a little bit about how you came up with the idea, and then kind of the birth of the company, because you still had your day job at the Toyota store. But tell us about how that kind of came into existence.
Yeah. So the births was stemmed out of a few points. One is that I'd say my entire career I focused on efficiencies. and improving things. So ingrained in me has always been a focus to improve or to make better whatever I've got, and to do so using technology. So I've had a fascination with tech and using tools to be able to just be more optimized and efficient. So when I was at another store prior to the one that you and I met at, it was Pauly Toyota, and the owner, Mike Pauly, said, here's the book. I probably have Dale's book around here somewhere. And he handed me the book and said, you got to read this, and I want to know what your thoughts are. And that was one of Dale Pollock's early book on V-Auto. So I read it. We had to sign up for V-Auto. I was able to convert what we did manually. And I've actually talked about this with a few industry people that have been in the business for a long time. And I referenced the old tablets, like the ones that are passed down by Moses, that we used to put the cards in. And I was surprised that a number of people that I've spoken to about it, they didn't know what I was even talking about. And I really felt that I was aging myself by talking about the inventory cards, and they didn't do business that way. So when I started using V-Auto, I was really evolving kind of manual way of doing things to more technical way. And I was really fascinated by the ability to do a lot more with less work and less effort through efficiencies. And so I really got deep into V-Auto, learned the software and the product quite well, quite deeply. And I'm a very competitive person. And as a used car manager, I was always focused on exceeding the new car department. So as a used car manager, 1-to-1 was kind of the bare minimum that I wanted. I wanted to outpace and outsell new. And in order to do so, you have to be pretty aggressive at acquiring inventory. You can't rely just on the trade-ins. That's not enough. In those days, about half the cars you sell, you'd get from trades. So that meant that I have to actively go out and acquire the other half of the inventory I was to be selling. And that put me in the position that I had to buy from the auction. And I was using V-Auto, and there was a range that suggested what I should pay for the cars, wherever I bought it. And I struggled really bad to buy cars from the auction that were in the range of what V-Auto suggested. So this was happening at a time that Dale Pollock was also talking about, for every $100 you reduce your average investment in your cars, that you would sell an extra unit. And so I was considering the efficiencies that I was getting through V-Auto, the inability to acquire cars from the auction and the prices suggested, the focus on reducing the average cost of inventory. And the fourth point was seeing the cars that we got in on trade that were like an older Sienna or older Camry, lower price point, that would sell in days rather than weeks or longer. And so this kept going through my mind and asking myself, where can I find those cars that we get in on trade that are gone right away, that would reduce my average cost of ownership in my local community, that are in the price range that V-Auto suggests, and allow me to outpace the new car department. So all this led me to the realization that those cars are in my market, and they're online for sale by owner on Craigslist, Auto Trader, and Cars.com in those days. So I found myself reaching out to consumers, and the experience that I had was that there was a lot of potential, but there was a lot of effort and time and energy invested in doing so, where I would perform the same searches every day. I'd reach out to sellers, letting them know who I am and what I want. And there was a divide of those that didn't want to talk to me because I was a dealer, and the ones that did. And as a used car manager, wearing lots of hats and not having a lot of extra spare time to have another job, I started looking at the tools that I was using for efficiencies, automation, and just tech-enabled components, and wondering, there's got to be something out there that's doing this. It's a repeating search, and it's automated engagement. So that led me to meeting Dale, finding a developer on my own and going on that path. But the idea was birthed out of the frustration that I was feeling with the focus on selling more used cars than new cars, and really struggling at the auction.
So you were driven, no pun intended, to beat the new car department and just win, and yeah, that'll change a lot of things for sure. For sure. And in that meeting with you, I remember sitting there and you were kind of toying with, at that point, should I use my technology or my learnings to go dealer to dealer or to go private party? And I was a little biased because I was working with another mutual friend of ours. and said, I think you should go this way because I think he's got a little jump on you. And not that I was influenced anyway, but obviously that's paid off in spades with you because you went from that little pitch work to now a very, very, very successful business. I don't know how many years later this is now, 8, 10, 12 years later. So tell us about how you kind of took that idea from that conference room and then blew it up with our mutual friend Bill into where you're at today.
Yeah, so when we first met in the conference room, and I recall that because I was friends with Phil, or I am friends with Phil Penton, and actually I drove him home that day, so I had a chance to really get to know him a lot better. Um, but what we had done is, since we were in Chicago, we just took 100-mile radius of Chicago as kind of our test data, and we just grabbed inventory. We weren't necessarily focused on separating the private sellers from the dealers at that point. We just had cars. And as we gathered the inventory, we also had a component of MMR overlaid on it. And obviously, with MMR, at that point, we need to have the VIN in order to get the valuation. And most of the inventory that had a VIN, still has VINs today, is the retail data. And that gave us the ability to calculate a number. We called it PTV, price to value. So we had the asking price of the vehicle as a percentage over what MMR was, average and clean. And we found some pretty interesting insights where, by overlaying all the retail and the private seller data, we found that 10% of the inventory line was priced within 110% of MMR average value. And so that's interesting. We dug deeper, and then we found that 1% of the inventory online was priced at MMR average. And I found that really interesting because, as a used car manager, I had a lot of friends that were other franchise dealers that we would do dealer exchanges. I had something aged that would be their product. I'd call a friend. It made sense for him or her. They'd buy the vehicle. And we do the same thing if there was something on the other side for them that may make sense for me. So I went to a few friends that were dealers, and I said, here's a list, here's a platform and a list of inventory, and I can show you in your market where you can buy. My case would have been where you can buy Toyotas within a 50 or 60-mile radius that are priced at MMR average value. And I thought it'd be a no-brainer that these dealers would pick up the phone, call the other dealer that was selling the car, they'd buy it, and everybody be happy. And what I found is that as I would go back and say, how's it going? It was a repeated instance that the dealer wouldn't sell them the vehicle. They wouldn't sell it because they're anticipating a trade, finance profit on the vehicle, warranty sales, and so on. So I found that to be a bit alarming and surprising that they were just unwilling to sell. Even if it was 150 days old or older, still in most cases, they wouldn't part with that car. So that was part of the onus that kind of helped us to focus more on private sellers rather than trying to change the game when dealers may not want to sell to other dealers. If it's a direct relationship, add a third party in the middle, then they're talking.
Yeah. What's interesting, for those of you who are joining who are not car people, what Tom's referring to with MMR is Manheim Market Report, which is basically auction data, right? So it's data that is actual transactions that actually happened in the last 30, 60, 90 days, whatever, maybe even longer. But what it doesn't show, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong on this, it doesn't show all the fees and transportation that's required. If you bought the car for 10 grand or $10,000, you may not own it for that. After you paid your auction fee and shipped it back, you may now own it for 11.5, right? After you get it back to the dealership. So, but it's a good baseline and really the only real-time data that we have on wholesale transactions every day around the country through the Manheim auction system. But what's interesting too, that you said that about the dealers, it's crazy. And this history on me. I was a used car manager, used car buyer, used car lot owner for years. And those cars that I was seeking to acquire and had recently acquired were my babies until they hit curtailment or 90 days. And then they were like, I got to get rid of these things. So the dynamic there, which I think translates a little bit to private sellers in that when they list their car on day one, they're proud of it. They're excited. My car is perfect and serviced and garage kept. And after a few weeks of no activity, no calls, no emails, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, I'm doing something wrong. So private parties, in my when I talk to lay people who non-car people, I'm like, private parties are either way too high on their price or way too low. There's really no in between.
Typically high.
Yeah, but you see the data, so you know better than me. That's why I trust your guys' data and your experience with that too. So again, so Bill comes. So we're at the meeting. At what point? How far along did Bill jump in, and then did you guys grow it into an actual, real, profitable business? Where because you both had day jobs. At what point did you jump in and go, all right, we're all in. Let's roll this baby up.
So the concept and ideation started in late 2010, and I didn't. I found the developer in September of 11 and started working on the project. And it wasn't until January of 2013 that I incorporate. Um, Bill, my co-founder, Bill came in sometime. I think it was May or April of 2014. So it was about a year or so after I had acquired. So the name was already set and those things were established. Where Bill was really helpful was a number of parts. One, his encouragement was to focus on private sellers and texting. So he really had vision to what was arguably the most impactful part of the product was really focused on those elements. And then as the company developed, he was really helpful in selling, obviously, as you would expect, from Bill rather, and his connections in the industry and all the things that he's done throughout his career. So it didn't really take off until 15 or 16. So we had hired a sales director that had done a really good job of getting the company from where it was really to multiplying. So I think we did uh, our first year in 2014, a revenue was like 56,000, and then it was 250, and then it was a million. Was the third full year of earning revenue. So that growth allowed us to then to have enough revenue that we'd be able to pay ourselves, comparable to what we were earning during our regular day jobs. So I left Toyota of Naperville in June of 2016. So there were about 3.5 years of moonlighting, post post setting up the structure of the company and really incorporating the business, that I was able to leave the company and focus solely and exclusively on van.
So I mean, you think about that. Just pause for one second. 2010, the ideation. 2016, to leave your comfort zone, right? I'm sure in retrospect that seems like a small window, but that's 6 years of hard work, late nights, conversations, meetings with dummies like me in a conference room telling you yes or no. And yeah, and then fast forward to me being a customer of your company again. Sometimes I think we have these conversations with guests where this sounds like an infomercial. It's not, because I have nothing to gain and this is not a paid thing, but I did hire your company as a service when I was at Nissan. And I'm telling you what, the amount of engagement and opportunities and cars that were for sale. Now, keep in mind, everybody listening, I was close to Chicago, so we had a huge bucket of private party sellers. So that was a blessing. But I mean, the technology and the efficiencies, like you said earlier, Tom, were amazing. I mean, just to get all these private party sellers in one place, which again, back to earlier days, I would, as a buyer, go through the newspaper, go through the classified, and I'd have to sort and look for private part, take out all the dealers and go private party. It was a lot of stinking work. And this was just all automation, all efficiencies overnight. Every morning I'd have, I don't know, Tom, you 25 to 100 new private party sellers that we could reach out to. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was definitely those days were certainly a lot easier than days today. But you're right, we would turn it on, and I think Bill mentioned often the biggest complaint was make it stop. It's too much. So uh, those are good problems to have for sure.
Well, and now with the evolution, so let's fast forward and maybe dive a little deeper in. So Bill's a little bit older than us, so he kind of has now exited from the day to day and even probably ownership. But he the game has changed in that initially you guys were mostly finding the inventory on the big marketplaces, right? Now there's a jillion little marketplaces, and Facebook Marketplace has stepped in to kind of screw up the whole game. So tell us about that blip in business or whatever struggles, because there were some interesting times as technology changed and as things were being hidden behind a lot of, I don't know if they're paywalls so much, but walls for you all to find out and get these private party listings.
Yeah, there's been a lot of evolution in marketplaces and consumers over the years. Really, it's shifted from one big one to another big one. So back in the day, Craigslist, of course, was the majority of where listings were posted, and that's really converted over to Facebook Marketplace, where Facebook now makes up between 70 and 80% of the market share. It depends on what part of the country it is, but it is 70 to 80% consistently. So it's that really makes up the majority of it. And there are some small ones. We have over, I think, 26 or 27 sources that we aggregate from. So yeah, Facebook, but Bring a Trailer, OfferUp, eBay, KSL, Car Soup, and a lot of other small ones. Um, so there are, but it's still predominantly Facebook Marketplace.
And just think about that, from being, boggles my mind sometimes, going from no vehicles listed to now 70-80% market share on private parties.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's clear consumers are looking, they're seeking transparency. They're seeking to know who the person is on the other side. And just to a pretty good degree, you can look at somebody's profile on Facebook and get a good sense. Is that a 6 month old account, or is it 6 years or 12 years old? Do they have photos of their family? Are they local? So sellers can get a pretty good idea of who they're dealing with before they decide to even engage.
Now, from your business side, has that helped or hurt what you all do as a business in getting in touch with those people and helping those people sell their cars?
I don't often look at it as helping or hurting. It's often evolving. So we as a company have always evolved. We've always evolved and morphed into what is working. So we're very curious. We're interested in solving problems. Um, we we don't believe that a specific idea, doesn't, it certainly shouldn't come from the top. It should come from either the person that's closest to the actual issue and they're working its way up, but focus on solving problems. So that's just who we are in being solution oriented. It's part of our core values that we're focused on solutions. And so I don't often look at it as helping or hurting. It's just primarily focused on, like, what is the issue at hand and how can we overcome or get around it.
Yeah, and consumer behavior obviously has changed, I think, in a lot of aspects just in life, right? Easier, faster, simpler. I think we're lazier in a lot of aspects, at least in America. But the fact that Craigslist, a lot of times you had to go set up your own a different account because you weren't on it for social media purposes or family or pictures. So sometimes that was a pain. And if you weren't selling stuff regularly on Craigslist, you're like, I got to create a new account or find my old password. The beauty of Facebook is, for most of us, we're on there often or frequently, so we can just go, oh, and I got this widget to sell, and I got this car to sell, and this bike to sell. That to me was a little bit uh, uh, brilliant on their behalf, right? To just say, hey, we're going to put another channel here on Facebook because we got billions of people already here. But that, like you said, the transparency, because I'm always leery when I click on one of those marketplace listings and I see the person has, you know, one contact and like is brand new. That it, because there's, I think, on
Yeah.
all these products, Tom, and maybe you could speak to that a little bit. There's fraud on all these platforms and marketplaces, right?
Yeah, that's what a lot of consumers are trying to avoid, which is why they're using more of Facebook Marketplace rather than Craigslist.
Where do you think someone could come in behind Facebook and supplant it, or do you think like, this is probably going to be it for while you and I are still in the business?
That's a good question. I haven't seen anything that would give me a reason to believe somebody would rival it at this point.
But again, when we started, Craigslist was it. So again, that kind of,
Yeah.
to me, it when I first saw Facebook Marketplace was coming on, like, that's cool for like garage sales and stuff. But when they got in autos, I was like, oh, this is this is gonna ruffle some feathers and change some things for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what would be something consumers would want over what they can get from Facebook Marketplace. So if they're seeking transparency of who the parties are on the other side, it would likely have to include that. Perhaps if it was doing something for them at no cost. So, I mean, maybe agents. I think of AI agents probably then as the next one to actually do the selling of the car for them on their behalf.
Interesting. I'll partner with you on that one. That might, that
We're
might
well, we are building an AI buyer, so I suppose to build an AI seller may not be that far reaching from what we're already working on.
yeah. I mean, that's the constant, issue that we've seen, throughout our careers is the when a private party is selling their car, again, they're a layperson. So they might say their car is extra clean, spotless, whatever. And in reality, well, I need new tires. There's $1,000. I didn't do the brakes. There's $2,000. It needs a full detail because my cat lived in the back. There's 500. All these things where you and I have to disseminate between a professional buyer, seller, and a layperson. So maybe AI could do that. I don't know. It it's funny. It's smoker car versus non-smoker car. I mean, all those things that come into play when you're trying to either beat down a seller's price or get top dollar for your car. So
Well, I used to have rental properties. I had 9 rental units, and it became a bit much for me to show the places and rent them out. I eventually sold them. But one of the interests that I had was building something that would organize almost like a CRM, kind of like what we're doing with Van, but for landlords. And part of it was when I wanted to show an apartment would be to do all the work of scheduling the showings or maybe an open house or whatever I had going on to do the work and to schedule activities and take care of it. And I don't see a reason why there wouldn't be something out there in the very near future that would essentially do that for sellers, where they would deal with potentially the scams or dealers reach out to them or somebody to be able to at least mitigate the conversations and provide just a service for them.
yeah, it's funny that you say that. I have a big dealer group who's a client for my day job, and he is their head of compliance. He's got multiple hats that he wears, but he has Tom on his phone. He's got an app because he's in charge of compliance. That's one of his big things. When they buy a new store or he visits a store, they have about 50 plus stores around the country, so he's traveling all the time. He takes pictures of an unlocked door, a broken window, a bathroom door that doesn't lock, all this stuff. And inside of this, I don't think there's AI in it yet, but it basically takes that, determines who it go. Okay, that needs to go to an electrician, call the electrician. That needs to go to a plumber, call the plumber. It's pretty cool because you think about all the things that need updating in 50 plus locations. It's a
Hmm.
full-time job for a couple people to figure that out. And they don't have a maintenance guy. It's not like, your guys in Naperville, they had 3 stores. You just bounced around to those 3 stores. You could have a truck and one maintenance guy or two. These are all over the country. They're in like 20 something states. So yeah, that when I told me about that product, I was like, is that who built that? And he's like, well, we kind of cobbled it together with some other technologies. But that efficiency is, again, you're back to that efficiency core value. Yeah, it AI is going to be able to do a lot of this, and he's a big believer in AI. By the way, he's all over it. So maybe there is something there for selling of vehicles and buying of vehicles. Who knows? Who knows? What have you learned? I know because this is the other thing I watched. I forgot about your rental properties, which goes to my hardworking thing. Because being a dad, being an entrepreneur, and being a property owner, holy crap! I remember talking to you after some days where you you were doing some restoration and cleaning and stuff. And I was like, when does this dude sleep?
Yeah, there were many years I slept an average of 4 hours a night for many years. I take a high priority for my health and fitness now, so I'm not doing 4 hour nights any longer. But it was many years like that. So yeah.
That wears on you. Where do you think, for you, what did you learn along this journey? Because obviously being in the car business from an early age, 15, 16 years old, and then jumping right into a business. And I know you've had some good mentors too, so maybe we can touch on that. You did mention one of them, Dale Pollock. Um, what have you learned through this journey? Would you do it again? Would you do it differently? Um, what's been kind of your biggest learning from Van and partnerships even too? Because that one of the things I did want to talk about is how you partnered with someone you knew a little bit, but then you guys really, I mean, even if there was friction or fights or disagreements, you really exemplified a really strong partnership, and you both taught each other things. And even on the exit, the buyout, you're still in touch, and there was not like you got to leave or I got to leave, which I had one of those, which is no fun. So I guess two questions there. What would you do it again? And tell us about what you think made that partnership special.
Would I do it again? Um, yeah, I would do it again. I'm an entrepreneur, so I am a very curious person that likes to solve problems, and I like to go my own path. So being an employee is not always the best for entrepreneurs. So doing my own thing has been a high priority. Having autonomy to do what I want, when I want, how I want, is something I really have sought after for a long time. And so, yeah, I would say I would do it again. Being an entrepreneur, it certainly is not easy. An easier path would have certainly have led me to staying an employee and just doing it. I was really good at what I did in the dealership, and I was evolving and growing. So that would have been a much easier path. And certainly during the COVID years, I know dealers did quite well, so I would have fared quite well in that period of time. And you asked me, what was my biggest learning over the years?
Well, biggest
I've
learning in
had
business and then biggest learning in partnership. Those two things I think people would love to hear.
the biggest lesson in business. I've had so many lessons. I've had a lot of, you mentioned mentors. You have Dale Pollock. He was never officially a mentor, but if it wasn't for Dale, I'd still be selling cars. Dale helped me immensely with introductions, um, the learning that I learned just from his books and him personally. Yeah, I've learned an absolute ton from Dale and mentors like him. So I've had a lot of people throughout my career that have just continued to invest, help, support, teach, mentor. Today, I have an executive coach. I am part of an organization called EO. It's Entrepreneurs Organization, and in that organization, I have a forum. There are 8 business owners, and we meet monthly, and it's been life changing. And it's access to resources and people like that have really been a game changer. Just connecting with people that really want to do well, to grow, to learn. Um, Ego, it's there, but it's not what drives them. It's more about doing good work. So it's hard for me to pinpoint down to like what was my biggest lesson in business, other than just to do good things. I would say one of the biggest lessons I've had, it's the common cliche of, the main thing is to keep the main thing. And part of what we've incorporated in our business is a framework for running companies. It's called EOS. I know it's similar to EO, it's a different acronym, but it stands for Entrepreneur Operating System. And in EOS, there's a framework for meetings, pulse. There are tools, so you don't have to recreate everything. When you have a framework and a practice that works in a business, it can often be applied to many businesses like it in scale and size. Now, at some point, when the company gets so large, it may not be as as adoptable as it would be for other companies. So, but that has been really helpful for us, in the sense of that we're able to operate a business and function well and have, key people in the right place, have the right tools, and so that's been huge for me, the access to the right people, the right tools, and just trying to do good work, good things with good people.
Yeah. Yeah, and your product's a good thing, so that makes it a lot easier. It's not you're not selling snake oil, you're selling something that if someone pays attention, listens to your best practices, they will succeed. No questions.
Well, I mean, the whole snake oil idea, like I wouldn't be able to wake up, I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror if we were doing bad things. So that would not be in our nature to do anything that's not really driving value. So we continue just to focus on driving value. So I would say the business lesson is kind of around that, of just adding value. And it applies also to the partnership side too. So you asked, what's the most important, what has been the most important part for me related to partnerships? And it's really aligning with people that are like-minded. So I was fortunate to meet Bill, and he and I had a connection that we could kind of observe and see right away that he's a go-getter, I'm a go-getter, he's a hustler and a grinder. And so there was a really good match. And so I think that allowed us to really get through some of the challenging times, as you would expect in any relationship. There's going to be tough points, and if one is really pressing it and going after things, I would say that that would be a abnormal and quite unusual if there wasn't some friction, especially two people that are really alphas. So Bill and I both appreciate and value autonomy, and we're both A personalities that have very strong wills and strong minds. So there is certainly going to be clash, when you have two personalities like that. But having that he is a good person trying to do good things and to add value always for his customers and anybody in his life, family, friends. Bill, he'd do anything for anybody.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that value, I think, I watched it firsthand, right? Which was in the beginning, a lot of it was just here's the cars that are for sale, stop, hands off, right? And then you guys were like, well, wait a minute, there's good opportunities there. You're just not executing. So we're going to add the texting and the uh, dashboard and the BDC and all that stuff that you kept adding value to, where almost a company could hire you guys and have a full service buying center almost, right, to power their stuff, so that you took away all the excuses and all the hurdles of resources and um, just people thinking that hiring van would all of a sudden deliver 20, 30 purchases a month. It just doesn't work that way. um, in reality, right? You could think that, but you've got to have that execution. And so, yeah, it's been cool to watch you guys add that value to the guys who weren't as aggressive as me or you. That hey, I just need the dang phone number and email. I'll do the work, right?
Yeah, it has been a mindset for some that paying for a technology is like, uh, because the dues are paid, the fish are going to jump in the boat. And the reality is that rarely happens. We haven't spoken in some time, but we actually, you mentioned like you could almost do that. Well, now you can. We've actually deployed a managed buyer.
Hmm.
So that, because it was the last piece of it, where we could build the best CRM in the world, the best tools, but it's like the best gym membership. If you're a service technician, it could be the best Mac toolbox with all the cutting edge tools, but it still requires somebody to pick it up and do something with it. Or if you have the best equipment at the gym, you still have to go and sweat. You still have
Yeah.
to put the work in. And the experience of building great tools and not being utilized created a lot of frustration for me. So we decided that we're going to launch a managed buyer. So we know dealers, especially today, no, probably more than ever, they need cars, but they also need people to execute the strategy. And so we are now staffing buyers that are remotely placed, that are working on behalf of the dealer. So a full-time buyer dedicated to that dealership that will engage with the consumers, provide offers, communicate the why sell message, and make appointments to drive them into the store. So they do all the work up to the point that the last step left is to convert them to an acquisition. Now, hopefully, they don't get placed in the service lounge and
Yeah.
made to wait an hour. So we've done as much as we can up to this point, and we're improving. So it's early. It's been only a few months. Our We had one buyer, one of just I think we have 15 so far placed. And Geo working in Cincinnati bought 16 cars last month. 16. And the average price point of those cars is around $10,000. The average year was 2015. So going back to my original thesis of finding cars that higher margin, faster turning, that are going to reduce my average cost of ownership, like we're achieving that now. So if
Yeah.
the average car is 10 years old and $10,000, these are cars that dealer is going to be able to sell very quickly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's amazing. Um, again, that you continue to innovate and change. Bill and I would joke all the time. I'm like, I'm just going to go get my own line of credit for like $1 million and buy these cars myself off of Van and just flip them, right? Just hand sell them back to dealers because there's margin there. And this was not intended, just for those of you who are watching. This was not a setup. It sounded a little bit more like an infomercial, just the timing of it. But Tom, thank you for sharing that because that's real. I had no idea. So good on you guys for executing on that and having those people out there, because it is harder and harder. And maybe I got those 4 questions and then your words of wisdom. But before we get to that, maybe we could touch on what Carvana and well, before it, Vroom and the other one, I forget the other one's name, Shift, did to private party acquisitions, kind of like CarMax did, but basically, in general, for those of you watching, it's made it harder and harder and harder for dealers to get trade-ins, right? So maybe from when you guys started to now, what have you seen those disruptors do to our space?
Well, the clear answer is they made it very hard. They made it very challenging for dealers to buy from consumers because consumers now have more choices than ever. They don't have to go anywhere. Now it should be noted that Carvana and CarMax are not always the top bidder for these cars. In fact, we've done the research to know that they're not often the highest bidder. But it depends on the dealer that is bidding on the car, where we encourage our stores that if you want to be competitive in the street buying game or buying from consumers, you have to be competitive. You have to step up on these cars. And oftentimes it makes sense because it's a local consumer. They have a story. They're typically nicer than the cars you would buy at the auction because the sellers are trying to compete with retail vehicles. And these are consumers that they have a chance to delight, to wow, to earn future business. So, but it has become significantly harder for dealers to compete at that level because it's expected to up the game. So if the competition keeps improving, then the dealer body has to improve. And so now the level of the competition has risen to a very high level that Carvana has done a great job of reducing friction and reducing issues of their process to be very smooth, very user friendly. And they've identified the pain points and systematically, one by one, tried to address each of them.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes when I talk to dealers about kind of these thorns in the side, the CarMaxes, the Carvanas, the Teslas, I keep reminding them like, listen, when this game started back in the early 1900s, you all could have kept upping your game and kept those competitors out, but you didn't. So learn from them, uh, innovate past them, react sooner, quicker, be proactive, not reactive, which is what we're doing in some of these instances. And your tool kind of helps them do that in a very real sense because again, to find those little cars that you can sell quickly. I always said, when we had our dealership, I'd go to the auction, and you live this too, Tom. You sit there 8, 10, 12 hours to try and buy 1 or 2 cars that you overpaid for, you got back and you sold it, you made $1,000. And I'd take in a trade or buy one off the street for 2,000 and I'd sell it for 5,000, which is a smarter use of funds, right? And so that's again one of the things that your tool and your guys' company does is find those little quick selling, high margin vehicles that normally would take hours and hours and hours of time, research, phone calls to find. You still have to put in the effort, but it's a huge game changing partnership or service that helps guys who need those used cars for sure.
And for us, for me specifically, it's very purposeful of the work that we do because of my upbringing. I talked about starting at 16. So I grew up in the car business, and who I am today is largely owed to my experience working at local dealers. And what I feel local dealers do is they create entrepreneurs. They create people that solve problems because every day that I worked in a dealership, I was handed a problem that I didn't always know how to solve, and I was expected to solve it and figure it out. And then we would somehow, we'd figure out the issue. It could be a hailstorm, it could be whatever, but there are many issues that are sparked, and it's given me a lot of skills that I otherwise don't think that I would have today. So I feel indebted to the local car dealer that I want to give back. So for me, Van is a purpose company that I want to protect and guard the local dealer to be able to compete. So when I look at CarMax and Carvana, if I were to work in a corporate environment, would I be the same person today? I think the answer is largely no. I don't think that I would be. So I really believe in the environment that dealers construct and build because when we look at what they give back to, not just their little league, but the amount of people that they hire, the cars they give away to people in need. Dealers do really good things and often have a bad rap for doing so, not for doing that, but for doing other things that are sometimes deservedly. But I feel indebted to help dealers. And so when it comes down to helping them compete against other big players, I would love to do that.
Yeah. You can definitely get a PhD. We've talked about that on multiple episodes where can you go and have literally you could not have finished middle school, right? If you have a driver's license and you're not a criminal, even some post criminals, you can get a degree, learning degree in marketing, sales, HR, inventory management, communications, technology. I mean, think about parts, service, just all the things that you can learn. Customer service being a huge one. You mentioned that earlier a little bit in the car business, right? That you get paid to do as opposed to paying for this education. And that's where I think, even at my place, I've mentioned a couple times, it was painful and we, spent a lot of money on that experiment, let's call it. But I could never have gotten that. I call it my PhD, right? I paid for a PhD in automotive through that experience and that partnership. But I would not be here today talking to you. Probably wouldn't even have met you, Tom, if I didn't have that experience in owning a dealership and all the things that came along, through that since '93. So yeah, big learnings and great because they do so much for the community. We see for those of you watching, you see some big dealerships in big cities. You might think, oh, those guys are all millionaires. Yeah, maybe they are, or maybe they're owned by a big corporation, as Tom pointed out. But most of them are in small towns, and they're all, for the most part, they're top employers, and contributors to your small community. So, there's 16 or 17,000 of them out there employing anywhere from what, Tom, 50 to 150, 200 people. They're a huge part of our economy. So, yeah, they're important. And I'm with you. I like to help them too. All right, we're gonna get to our rapid fire here because I appreciate you and I want to keep this to an hour here. So, rapid fire. First car.
84 Buick Skylark,
Ooh, cushy, comfy.
$400. So I
Nice.
bought it.
There you
It was
go.
a
That's a
beater.
good one. That's a good one. Favorite car. You've had a
I
lot.
had a range. I had a Range Rover. Well, it was either I had a Range Rover but I had an A7 that I really enjoyed. Probably the A7. Mine. Well, I leased it and I went through 15 tires in the 3 years. So let's go back to the Range Rover.
Yeah, burn some rubber on that bad boy. All right, current car.
I have a Jeep Gladiator Rubicon diesel that was upfitted by AEV.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
gonna have
fun.
to. I'm gonna have to get a ride in that one.
Yeah, so we do a lot of off-roading and deep country camping. So we're very outdoors oriented.
Yeah, and I still have that domain, by the way. You and I should talk about offline jeeplovers.com, which is
Okay.
parked with nothing on it right now. But and then what's your dream car?
More outdoors oriented, but the old school Defenders, so Range Rover, but the old school Defenders that have been completely upfit. So there are a number of companies that are doing full restorations. One of our dealers is Highgate, which is actually, you probably know them out in Barrington, Illinois.
I
They
could throw
do,
throw a ball right to
okay.
their office right there.
Yeah, so they do some amazing work, but there's another company called Helderberg. You may know Paul Potratz.
Hmm.
So that's Paul's company. And there are a couple other companies that do like full restorations. The reason it's still the dream car is they're often around 300 to $400,000 for fully restored. So
Yeah,
they're very expensive.
very expensive. Yeah, I saw they'd have them at the Barrington Car Show, fully restored, and I was like, "Oh, look at this neat car!" And then I hear the price tag, and I'm like, "What? That's double my first
Yeah.
house, guys." That's crazy. All right, well, Tom, so much thank you. We got one last question. We'll leave it on this. This is our words of wisdom, our wow question. What would you tell your kids, my kids, young Tom, young Carl, as far as just a nugget? Doesn't need to be profound, doesn't need to be a novel, just could be something as easy as be humble, right? But a words of wisdom, parting gift from Mr. Tom Gregg.
Yeah, I like the 2 ears, one mouth, but a little bit deeper would be to listen with the intent to understand, not to respond. So I think that one, certainly me like the one to jump in and answer questions. I have to process that one periodically, is listen with the intent to understand, not to respond.
You are very good at that, which I've never complimented you on this before, but you are a person who, because you listen before speaking, you're very hard to get a read on, which in business that's good a lot of times because like I don't if cards close to the vest type of deal, right? Like you can't tell is Tom mad at me? Is he glad at me? Like because you're processing and you're like, okay, man, I don't know, should I say something? Should I not? But you're really good at that poker face. So that's a good
Thank
thing
you.
in business, I think. So
Appreciate it.
anyway. Well, we'll have to hook up soon, get a ride in the Gladiator, and thank you again so much for joining. Again, we're here to encourage, educate, and entertain. I hope you got some education on vehicles and inventory here. I hope you got some encouragement that a guy could start at 16 years old and build a huge, successful company and be an entrepreneur and a great dad and a great example to me in just keeping all the plates spinning. So thank you for that too, Tom. And
Thanks, Carl.
just appreciate you and continued success in vehicle acquisition.
Likewise. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.
You will. Take
All right.
care.
Bye bye.